right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome again to another episode number 4 of the Scenic Route Podcast, with your host, Amos York, AJ York, and my brother.
This is Terrence York. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Scenic Route
Podcast.
Today's episode is from Boyz to Men, featuring a very special guest from back in Scenic Woods, Mr. Reggie Hicks. Reggie, thank you for joining the show.
Honored to, man. Glad to be here.
Yeah, so, in this week's episode, we're going to sit down with Mr. Hicks, and it's one of Amos's, well, actually one of our oldest friends that we know of. I mean, we all started off together in Northeast Houston. And we're gonna explore his amazing journey that he's undertaken in his life, and then we will delve into his journey, his obstacles, and his ultimate triumphs. He has quite a story to tell, and with that being said, we want to just get right into, I guess, the early years, Mr. Hicks, on how you and Amos came together in your journey as a youth and adolescence.
Yeah, man. I think, if I'm correct, it goes back to 1979.
All right.
And we started, my mom, we played street ball back then.
Right.
You don't see people playing in the street anymore. And so we were playing street ball. I hit a tennis ball and broke my mom's window. And she told my dad, if you don't take them to the park, I'm going to beat them to death. And so that's where it started, man, off Mesa Road.
Mm-hmm.
To the first draft. I got drafted by the Tigers. Of course, y'all were the Astros. And I was a little envious and jealous because all my buddies, man, they played for Astros. Like, how did this happen? So anyway, played the first year out. Me and Big T Wells, Torrance Wells, we won the same team.
Hanging on the wall.
Huh?
First, what I always say, hanging on the wall.
Yeah, big bopper. And so the next year, I did get an opportunity to play with the Astros, man, and that was the beginning of so many memories, so many fun times, so many great relationships that are still powerful in my life. And Amos and I, of course, were going to school. So now in the summers we played ball. Our first year together, of course, we ran the table and won a state championship. And so we had a lot to talk about at school.
Right.
Junior high, you didn't have baseball, but man, I tell you what, we were pretty cool for playing baseball. So, our relationship began in, junior high from all the way out through high school. And,
hold on, man. Hold on, Reggie.
You going too fast, man.
You can't skip over 8th grade, brother.
Over the 8th grade.
You can't skip over the 8th grade.
Listen, before y'all get into 8th grade, I want to kind of steer you back because you talked about something that's very unique, and I saw that Amos posted a photo of the Little League Astros, and so we're about 45 years away from the anniversary of that team that went down to Mineola.
Come on.
And won a state championship.
Yeah.
And so, Reggie, you talked about the draft, the initial year. So you weren't part of that, the initial draft.
No.
But some of the guys that you came aboard with that team the following year, those guys were basically a team of misfits.
Yeah.
And my dad, Bishop Amos York, was able to take those kids, man, and teach them the fundamentals of baseball. And I recall that summer, the summer where y'all went down to Mineola and won that championship, man. That was probably one of the most exciting summers that I can remember as a youth. You want to talk about how all of that unfolded and the memories that the two of you guys share from that experience?
Yeah, man, it was pretty cool. Man, I got an opportunity to play with all my friends, and of course, Bishop Amos York was the coach. as a kid, we just wanted to play ball, right? Like, and so here was this guy who not only was a coach to us, became a father to us.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, we went to church growing up as kids, but he introduced us, I think, to a way of life, of faith, and didn't really understand it then, but looking back, it became foundational for me and so many other men that played on that team. Uh, and so that summer, here we go. We think with something, we go down to Minneola and we lose the first game. And back then it was double elimination.
Right.
You hear me? So we got one game to lose. And I tell you, man, we ran the table and those people literally tried to run us in the ground. Again, this is 1980. Tyler, Minneola, it's not really a free place. There was a lot of racism. And yeah, man, we were playing 5 or 6 games to come back to get back in the hunt of things. And when we finally won that championship game, I remember the hostility, the looks from so many other people.
Right.
But man, it created such a bond for us as young kids, and it just really poured gasoline on the fire for us to be baseball players and to be good people on and off the court, off the field. So, man, we had such an awesome time. So that was just the beginning of so many good years.
You remember how we lost that first game?
I do not.
Jay hit a home run to win the game. And round the third, for some reason I still can't explain to the day, I took my helmet off.
I remember
that. Didn't count the run. I was like, why would I do that? I mean, what? It wasn't. I didn't hit the home run. Why would I take my helmet off? And who knew that was a rule back then?
Right.
So we really didn't know that was a rule in Texas teenage baseball, but it was, and we ended up losing that game. I believe it was 2-1.
Yeah, 2-1.
And they tried some trickery on us the next day. They told us the game started at 10 o'clock, and it actually started at 9 o'clock. And for some reason, we got up early and came to the park early that day, and we were just in time to play the baseball game. I don't know how I remember that, but I remember that.
Mm.
But it was, you talk about great times with people that were lifelong friends and building, like Rich said, building that relationship, building that culture. It's amazing that it's been this long since we won, and we've never really went back to Smokey Jasper and just really reflected on the place where we accomplished that monumental milestone. And I think it's past time for that. Everybody that played out there, I mean, it's an experience. Guys still talk about that to this day. People that I vaguely remember me. They remember the entire team. They remember the coaching staffs. And there are stories that are out there about us, Reggie, that I'm hearing for the first time. I lived it, but I don't even remember. I don't even remember it. So, yeah. And also, you remember Darryl Stewart, right? That played against us.
I do.
His son played at Nimitz while I was coaching there.
Awesome.
And I shared the memory of the only game that we lost, the next title that we won. It was 1-0. Do you remember this game against the Twins? Herb struck out everybody else. Stewart had the only hit, which was a home run, and we lost 1-0.
You got a good memory.
Of something. My wife will tell you it's a selective memory.
It's selective memory.
But the memory I want to remind you of is we dressed up like Mr. T and went to school like that, man. You don't remember?
I do. I do. I had a vest and I cut the sleeves off. I thought I was something, didn't I?
And I don't know where we got Mardi Gras beads from. We had on Mardi Gras beads, and that was our gold chains, man. I think that was one of the funniest things that I could look back on is just like, what were we thinking at that time, man?
Yeah.
Those were actually my Mardi Gras bees that I brought back from New Orleans when we
From New
went
Orleans.
we
From
went to the
look,
Mardi Gras with the band.
yes, Forrest Brook, the band.
Yes.
Come on, I do.
Yes. But I wanted to ask you, because I often think about it, and if it had not been for the male influences that was there during that time in our life, how much differently do you think we would have turned out? If we didn't have baseball and that support and those male role models for us in our life, how different do you think our lives would have been?
Well, I think I speak from experience. I think it helped shape our character and everything about us. No matter what adversity or challenges we experienced in life, we always had something foundational to go back to.
Right.
Unfortunately, for a lot of young men, they don't have the foundational thing. And so when you kind of lose your way or you get off track, what do you go back to? You go back to where your mom was doing crack or selling, doing tricks, or you go back to where your dad was hustling. So a lot of people don't have that foundation that we had. And so even for us that may have had a couple of bad chapters in the middle of the book, we still had something to go back to grasp hold to. And man, I'm eternally grateful for that, man. I will always be grateful for everything and the men that God placed in my life.
Right. Um, when we were at Forest Brook Senior High School, I tell people this all the time. It was we left family at the back park and went to school and had family at school.
Mm-hmm.
Coach Reed coached my brothers. He was influential. You know, he really didn't take that much off of us. You know, he kind of kept us in line. And there's always that thin line. I tell everybody, there's always a thin line between doing what's right and doing what you think is right. You know, and a lot of times I did what I thought was the right thing. It wasn't always the right thing, but what I thought was the right thing. We had people that were there in our lives to be influential to us and get us to the point where we needed to be in order to accomplish the things in our life that we needed to accomplish. So that led me to, after Forest Brook, there were so many times, so many situations to whereas I knew the right thing to do, but it was hard for me to do those right things, if that makes sense to you.
Mm-hmm.
Because being a young man during that time, there was so many things that are out there that you would gravitate to because you saw the guys who were selling dope with the nice Mercedes and the gold chains and the gold rings, and you wanted those things too, you know? So the temptation was there to go off the beaten path, but somehow the things that you were taught were already instilled in you, and you had that choice. God never takes away our free will, you know? So that free will was always there. And I ain't gonna say I was a saint, because I was not a saint. What my kids today in my classroom think I grew up somewhere in River Oaks or somewhere. It's like I didn't. You know what I mean? So I want to find out from you. Like, I know you had some obstacles in your life that you freely share with people, and I respect that so much that you're willing to share your story about what you've been through in your life. So just, you know, tell us a little bit about where you've been and where you're at right now, because it's such an amazing thing to me to even behold.
Right. And so you were talking about through high school, I had great success playing ball, meeting people, friends. And I had never really failed at anything. By the middle of my freshman year, I was playing varsity baseball. I was around cool people. Growing up in a 2-parent home. Back then in Sennewood, Texas, I thought in Sennewood, I just thought we were the bomb. I thought that was our rivals for me. You know what I'm saying? That was a lot of other neighborhoods, but I felt like we had it good, right? And so growing up in a 2-parent home, again, having male influences in my life, I wasn't the smartest guy in the classroom, but I was well enough in the classroom to make it. And so I never really experienced failure. And so after high school, I had a car wreck and I sat out. Then I went to try for San Jack, the legendary Wayne Graham. And so Andy Pettis on the mound. We got the spring game. I get to hit against him. After the spring game's over, they put up a list of who made the team and who didn't make the cut. So I go in there and I don't see my name on there. And I'm thinking, dude, like, do he know who I am? Like, you know, I encourage kids all the time. I'm doing select baseball now. And I remind kids that once you get to that level, to that next level, everybody got talent. Your talent means nothing. Who's going to be more committed? Who's going to work harder? Who's going to do the right thing on and off the field? And I didn't apply myself. And so, he wasn't saying I wasn't good enough to play ball. What he was saying is right now, this is who I'm going with. And so here, all of my buddies that graduated high school had on that one baseball team, we had, you know, at least 4 or 5 guys get the draft and play pro baseball. We had guys in diwn schools, all of these different things. And here I am, didn't even make the team. I didn't make the cut. So in my mind, I didn't measure up. Right. And so I didn't want to be surrounded. I didn't want to be surrounded by successful or what I saw as successful men. And so I kind of chose a whole nother different crowd to kind of hang out with and just be with, because, you know, I needed, my identity was wrapped up in baseball. So here it's snatched away. So who am I really? When you take away the baseball, when you say, hey, you're not going to play for the next 3 months, who am I really? And so it led to a choice that I made. I take total responsibility and accountability. I hold myself accountable. But 2 friends and I, we went out, made a bad choice, bad mistake. A life was taken. And as a result, I went to prison and spent the next 30 years of my life in prison. And for the people who have experienced, applies everywhere. People have experienced incarceration. They know it's not easy. Like I look on some televisions or I hear some conversations and I hear people glamorizing the darkest place in America. No, that's nothing to be glamorized. And so I went from one culture of family, of love, of friends, of people looking out and wanting the best for each other. And I go into this other culture where you got black benches and white benches and Hispanic benches. And the first unit I hit, 42 people were killed in the first year. So, you know, 60 minutes and Dateline and all of these different things. And I would go in my cell at night and I would lay down and face the wall. And I'd be like, God, man, what is going on? Right? Like, I'm not supposed to be here. But I remind people that, so there are choices that lead up to an ultimate choice, but one bad decision, man, could change, drastically change the next 4, 5, 6, even 30 chapters of your life. And that happened for me. So anyway, fast forward, for the first 18 years in prison, it was tough for me, man. I wasn't gang related. I wasn't going to be gang related. I wasn't homosexual. I wasn't going to let nobody take my butt. We just men here. And I wasn't going to be extorted. So you had a lot of people that we grew up and went to school with. Elementary, junior high school was in Texas prisons paying protection because they didn't want to fight or couldn't fight for themselves. Right. And so prison was this whole other beast. And so instead of trying to influence or change the culture that I was thrust in, I became a part of the culture. And for 8 years, I became who I never wanted to become. So here I am. I became a racist. experiencing all the racism. Man, I hated white people. I hated Hispanic people. I fought because, again, I wasn't going to let nobody, I wasn't going to be in a gang. You wasn't taking nothing from me. Right. And before you know it, I was thinking, how could these dudes extort these weak people? Before you know it, I was accepting some cookies and some soups and all of this foolish nonsense. For me, it took me going to what is called administrative segregation in prison, where you're in a 6x9 cell, 23 hours a day. You're treated like an animal. They talk to you like an animal, and you're locked in that cage all day. And I'll never forget classification say you're going in there for the next 5 or 6 years, and we're not hearing it. And that's when 18 years into my prison sentence, kind of like Job, right? You know, I was in prison. I was dead at a well. I mean, here I am. I'm in prison, but that wasn't enough. I had to do something stupid to get further in prison. Right. And that's why I got on my knees and cried out to the Lord. And I was just like, what am I doing here? I'll never forget hearing the officers talk outside my cell though. And they were saying stuff like, oh, they all cusses, B's and H's. That's all they stupid. You know, that's the way they're raised. And I was like, wait, hold up. That's not my story. Right. I wasn't raised like that. Right. And so I purposed in my heart, I'm going to stop. I'm going to watch what I say. I'm going to stop talking like that. And I just feel like as I began to study scripture, read books, and in that 6x9 little cage, I mean, I could literally touch both sides just like this. And I began to pursue the Lord. I surrendered myself to the Lord, of course, but I also read books, and I felt like God impressed it on my heart. You need to go to college. And I was like, okay, God, you can't go to college and say it because you're there 23 hours a day. So I was like, okay, God, get me out of here. I'll go to college. I'll do whatever you want me to do. Right. And so instead of waiting 6 years, 11 months later, I was able to get out, enrolled in college, got a college degree, went to Lee College Welding. I learned welding. I started teaching men welding. Every class that TDC offered to grow spiritually, any kind of class they had, I successfully completed them. I started facilitating classes. And then one day the senior warden was like, hey, come in. I want you to do some stuff. And so they started bringing people, senators, judges, all kind of people. I got to share my story of what God was doing with me and transforming my heart. And so the warden had 18 years of paperwork on me fighting and being a fool down there. And so this drastic change, you know, we pray for grandma who's 115 years old to be healed of cancer, correct? And so we want grandma to live 15 more years. And I'm okay with that. I mean, my dad, he's 80. He's experiencing some health issues. I want my dad to live on. But I've come to believe that the greatest miracle from God is a transformed life. Right. Nothing is greater, man, because a transformed life, what does he do? He gets married and he transforms a family. And then that family transforms a church and then a community and a whole nation of people are different because this transformation that happened with this one. And so anyway, so God began to transform my heart, and I got an opportunity to mentor, disciple a lot of men on the inside. And then I had to deal with the reality in open court. My judge said in front, I remember your father. I don't know if you remember, but your father came and testified for me as a character witness. And I was given a life sentence. And in open court, my judge said that, asked the DA, he said, hey, why you didn't get the death penalty for him? I wasn't even eligible for the death penalty. But in open court in front of my family, he said that. And I remember his words. He said, you'll die in prison. And the world will be a better place because you will die in prison. And that was a game changer for me. And I'll never forget, your dad came in the back. They allowed him to come in the back. And he sat down and he talked with me and he said, hold your head up. Your dad prayed with me. I'll never, ever forget that day. And anyway, so now my life is being transformed. Instead of being a part of the problem, I'm becoming a part of the solution. But the reality was still, I could hear that voice from that judge saying, you're going to die in prison. Right. Now, I don't know what it's like to have cancer. I don't know what it's like to have a terminal illness where a doctor say you have 6 or 8 months to live. I don't know what that's like. But I do know what it's like every single day to wake up with that voice in your mind saying that you're going to die in this place.
Mm-hmm.
This concrete jungle that you live in, this dark place that you live in, this is where you die. And so prison became my hell.
But I don't mean to cut you off.
Yes, sir.
But I'm glad you brought that up. The day that my dad was getting ready to go, he was getting dressed, and I was like, "It's time to go." And I said, "Let me take a shower." And my dad was like, "No." I was like, what you mean?" He was like, "No, it's like you can't come. I don't want you to see him like that."
Yeah.
From that moment on, it became unreal to me, if that makes sense to you. It was so hard for me to believe it.
Yeah.
But not having that closure of seeing all of that transpire and take place in your life, I never could put words to it. It was just not real to me.
Yeah.
Hey, Rich, how old were you when this took place?
Well, so I was a 19-year-old kid, and people say, "Well, you're a grown man." Well, so I played baseball, so I started school early. I graduated at 17 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And so even though I was a mature, big, strong boy, I was not mature in a sense of being a man.
Right.
I don't know if you've heard the term, what they call it. They like to say, arrested development. There you go. And so many men go to prison, and you wonder why. You go to Walmart and you see a 55-year-old man acting like he's 17. Well, a lot of people go in prison, and for 30 years they're in prison, and when they come out, it's just they have the mindset of that 19-year-old kid that left.
Right.
And it gets even darker, Terrence, because I have friends who went in at 14 and 15 and done 30 years. And so, so it was very, very difficult for a young man to be thrust in that culture. Again, responsibility and accountable. I hold myself that 100%. I don't want nobody to feel sorry for me because God has been very, very good to me. But it's a culture shock. It's a reality shock, and it's tough.
But to your point, Reg, you made a very valid point when you said the entire time you were there, the words of that judge was ringing in your ear, and so you were placed in a 6x9, to whereas the only voice that you heard was the last voice that you heard before your life changed forever.
Right.
And it kept repeating itself.
Yeah.
On replay over and over and over again. And I can only imagine how difficult that conversation with yourself must have been, and saying, man, trying to replay the steps of how you got to that point over and over, and thinking, what could I have done differently?
Right. Right. You know, it's funny you say that because one thing that my mom used to always tell us growing up, even in high school, boy, you don't need to be out after 2 o'clock in the morning. Ain't nothing out there but trouble. And she used to always say that. I remember distinctively when my case happened and I was running down the street scared, afraid. And I remember getting to where I was and I looked at my watch and it said 2:08.
Oh, wow.
It's like 8 minutes after 2. So these are things that you look back on. But yeah, Terrence, it was a challenge. But that's not the whole story. So a lot of people say, well, share your story with me. But God's still writing my story. It's not over. And of course, the judge said I would die in prison. I had 5 set-offs, which means you denied for parole, 15 years worth of set-offs. And about 5 years before I was released, Mike Barber, who played for Houston Astros many years, became a spiritual father to me. And he taught me something. You're talking about the words. Remember, Terrence, you were just saying those words. And I don't want to get religious, but this is not religion. This is kingdom stuff. So God, I remember the Bible says faith cometh by hearing and hearing the word of God. That was the only voice that I could hear, that you're going to die in prison. It wasn't until I started hearing another voice.
Yeah.
And so every day, even though I had a set off for 2 years, 5 years, 3 years, I would get up and I would get up and say, any day now I'm going home. And it's amazing the favor that God gave me over the last 12 years. I had the freedom to walk around. We started the most innovative program in Texas prisons. We started the very first AdSeg ministry where I was an AdSeg in those little bitty cells. The warden gave us an opportunity, 5 of us, to go, and we would speak to those men, pour into those men in the first year of the program. This was the first ever in Texas prison history. Started on the wing unit. But we poured into those men live in the first year. Over 150 men renounced gang affiliations, came out of SEG by going through a grad program. And we watched over 100 men get a life to the Lord. And so God was good to me the entire time, but I still was there. But I changed what I was hearing. God has sent me my wife. I don't know if I haven't shared much about my wife. She's such a godsend for me. I didn't look for my wife. I didn't want no pen pal, any of those things. I got a letter one day, and I was like, "Who is this?" So I wrote her back, and she was like, "Oh, I know a mutual friend of yours, and they told me you were a good person." This and that. And I was like, "Don't write. I don't do pen pals because if you write back and forward, you got to spend money on a stamp." I was frank with her. I told her, I say, I buy cheeseburgers in the chow hall with stamps, man. You know, they make them big, good contraband cheeseburger, but you have to have a little money. And if you had 2 or 3 stamps, you can get you some good cheeseburgers. So I was like, baby, I don't waste my stamps on writing nobody in the mail. I go get cheeseburger with them. And so anyway, I told her, I said, well, if you really want to be my friend, come visit me. She came. And for 3 years, every single weekend, she never missed one weekend. Wow. And I was like, dude, like, and so she started giving me hope. And finally, I was introduced to her daughter, and I got an opportunity to see something different. Right. Now, even inside of the walls, I'm looking beyond the walls, and I got an opportunity to be close. I married my wife. We just celebrated 16 years of marriage.
Congratulations.
And I got to be, sir.
I said, congratulations, man.
Thanks, man. Thanks. And we got an opportunity to really dream again. I began to dream again. Oh God, never overestimate. I mean, dreaming is powerful. Anyway, and so that happened. And the cool part about it, when I met my wife, the oldest daughter was 6 years old. She was a little bitty kid. She didn't know very much. She just loved me to death. And we play hobby horse, this and that. And in less than a month, man, I'll get to walk her down the aisle and give her away. And she loved me. She honored me, man, and just such a powerful thing. So anyway, so I just continued to say, any day now, I'm going home. And so one day when I wasn't even up for parole, I got a lay-in saying I was going to see parole. I went to see parole. A commissioner came to see me, which is kind of unheard of. And all the set-offs I had gotten, it would take them 2 or 3 months to give me an answer just to say, no, you're not going home. So I went and saw her on this Wednesday afternoon. And that Friday, they called me out and said, man, you're going home to your family. And so COVID had hit. And so it's crazy. So generally, when you make parole, they ship you to another unit. You catch the bus, you wait a few days, and you release to your family. That's not my story. I'm going to show you the faithfulness and goodness of God. When I made parole, it was COVID. So when I went home to my family, they let me walk out the front doors, the same doors that the wardens, the same doors that the officers come in. I got to walk out to my family. And I'm thinking, God, this is so cool, right?
Right.
And so anyway, so I'm released from prison, and the PTSD. So we talk about PTSD for the military. God bless the military, all the men who served. But let me tell you, man, they come out of prison. So I'm sitting down, I'm squatting down, brushing my teeth, spitting in the toilet one day, and my wife and my daughter looking at me with almost tears in their eyes, and they're like, what you doing? I was like, brushing my teeth. And she's like, well, why are you spitting in the toilet? I was like, you don't spit in the sink. And she's like, no, we spit in the sink. Well, in prison, the sink is the most sacred, cleanest place in the cell.
Uh-huh.
You eat out the sink, you wash your clothes in the sink, the toilet, and if I've seen people get life flighted behind spitting in the sink.
What?
So, huh?
That's crazy, man. Hey, Reggie, we gonna stop it right there. We gonna put a pin in it.